Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I am joined today by a doctor who has been part of Shared Practices in our world for a little while now, 2.5 years, and I'm excited to get to know his story before and while he's been in practice ownership. But first, if anyone's wondering, he's not being held hostage in a Middle Eastern dungeon.
Yeah.
This is the attic of your dental practice. Is that where you are?
This was a storage space that we converted to the doctor nook, if you will. So we have 3 computers now, and we have a space for doctors to do their notes. And it's great because every time we interview an associate, I get to bring them up here, and that's immediately when they say, well, this might not be for me. So it's a good gauge of, hey, is this going to be a good fit or not for you?
Are they high maintenance? If they're okay
Yeah.
with this being their office, then they're a good fit.
Right.
Welcome to the show, Austin. I appreciate your willingness to hop on and share.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I'm glad to be here. I've been with SP for a couple of years now, so we've had a lot of success because of you guys, so I'm glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, about where you're practicing and your journey to practice ownership.
Sure. Yeah. So we bought this practice about 2.5 years ago. So when I graduated dental school in 2018, I did the whole military thing. So at the HPSP, went to the Army, did my 4 years, had a great time, met some great people, learned a lot. But didn't do a day more, didn't do a day less. Did my 4 years, and then I transitioned out. Found this practice. What brought us to East Tennessee, so my wife, she's also a dentist. We met in dental school. She was very clear when we met that she would follow me for the Army period, but as soon as the Army was over, East Tennessee was where we were going to establish our home base and our family. So I was totally on board with that because I wanted her to marry me. I had never been to East Tennessee, so I didn't know anything about anything. So I was like, yeah, sure. So that's how I found my way out here. I was very clear with my wife lately that I was very passionately wanting to be an owner at some point, ideally sooner than later. She's, an amazing person, amazing wife, and she's always let me just chase those dreams.
Did you already say where in the Army you ended up going? Where did she have to go?
Yeah. Well, so she was still in dental school, so it was a long distance, situation. They stationed me in Fort Leonard Wood, so hardly
lost
anyone.
in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So they told me I traveled the world, and I went to Missouri and never left.
All 4 years?
All 4 years.
Okay.
And then COVID happened, so no, nothing. I just sat there and did my thing. But I honestly had a great time, and I learned a lot, met a lot of great people. It's not a desirable location, so anyone that's not, a military background or understand how that, different. Some bases are more desirable.
Coveted. Yeah.
This is not a coveted one. Nobody wants this one. They send you in if you're a
some
sucker.
of them, it's hard to moonlight even. It's hard to
Right.
get, private practice experience on the side or during the weekends or holidays. And if I remember correctly, there is some opportunity there, but it's not abundant.
Yeah, and I was able to moonlight, which was fortunate. Again, when COVID happened, everything kind of got crazy. But so I was able to do some of that, but that's where they put me. That's where I did my 4 years.
At that point, did you find the practice straight out of the Army? Did you transition out and buy, or did you have a period in between?
No period in between. So that last year of the Army, did a lot of just legwork, and it feels so long ago. It wasn't that long ago, but it feels so long ago now. But a lot of phone calls, a lot of mailers, a lot of things that I pulled from the SP podcast on how to try to find a practice. Just getting the feelers out there, and then just going through the communication, the reports, just trying to find something that met what we wanted. And that process is different for everybody, but it's not, especially when it's your first time doing it, not a super fun process. It's because there's so many. It's stressful. There's a lot to look at, a lot of unknowns, and then you're moving your family, so you're trying to figure out geographically where can we live. And but we did that last year of the Army. We just spent a lot of time trying to find something. We were fortunate to find something and make that timing work, where as we transitioned out, closed on the practice, and then kind of went straight into the ownership. I don't recommend that. Looking back,
Okay.
I mean, I loved it. I had a great time. I don't regret it at all. I will say it wasn't the easiest thing. There was those first 2 to 3 months were pretty intense sometimes, especially because when you're making that that jump, especially to just the geographical distance. You're not there to like you just kind of show up that first day and you're transitioning the staff, the patient base, everything over on day one, and it can be a lot.
Well, and a lot of people do that anyways, even if the geography wasn't holding them back,
True.
because you don't want to lose the team, you don't want to lose the patients by them getting noticed that you're coming in. So, um, I think it's great coming straight out of the army. It's harder if you're like in Germany or you're in Korea to try and buy a
Yeah.
practice overseas. Maybe you want to go like have a gig somewhere else. I think the other hard part is the timing window of like,
Hmm.
oh, and we're no longer getting paid here by the army, which wasn't a generous salary to begin with compared to other dental opportunities. And then if there's delays or there's a few month period, sometimes that transition can be a little difficult. So let's get into the anatomy of this practice. This is where it's like, okay, now I want to know. Like,
Sure.
obviously, you've said when you bring doctors up to interview them that this, the litmus test of how sketchy this upstairs room is.
Yeah.
So that means you've interviewed doctors. You have a big enough practice where it's not just you. You have a spouse who's a dentist. So tell us about the anatomy of this practice. How many ops?
Sure.
What was the circumstances you were taking over?
When we bought the practice, it was 8 operatories. It's now 9. That is all we can fit in this space. When we bought the practice, it was a 1 doctor, 2 hygiene space. So
Okay.
one thing that is a little unique and challenging to our situation was we wanted to find something that would fit me and my wife. So you need chairs, and you need capacity for growth. So you got to find something. And this was why this became such a nice, tempting thing to us, because had the chairs, and there's only 1 doctor, 2 hygiene. So in
Yep.
theory, you can kind of transition into that and then scale it up. If you have the patient base and you can continue to grow it, that can work out really well. So that was a big plus in that initial due diligence of, hey, we have the chairs. It's rural, so the patient base based on the metrics was also there. Now it was just getting in there, transitioning them over, bringing in more hygiene, adding the hygiene capacity, and then kind of grow from there. So that's kind of like the very basic what we were looking for and what we were trying to find.
So you bought, you bought a true solo, which is like, or productive solo, sorry, where it's like, okay, this is a healthy 2 hygienists, 1 doctor practice. I love that it had 8 operatories. I love that it was rural. The demographics supported growth. Do you remember the collections? Do you remember what it was doing at the time you bought it?
Don't hold me to this because it's been a while, but it was somewhere around like 900, 950, somewhere.
Okay. And is that around what you paid for it, I'm assuming? Is somewhere around 100% to 80% of collections?
We paid 750, and then we got 75 working capital.
Okay, great. So, pretty standard to be closer to 100% of collections sometimes, but rural helps in your favor as well. So do you remember, was there a lot of new patients coming in at that time? Was the growth going to be an uphill battle that you could tell at least the engine hadn't started? Or were you like, you know what, if we just close the back door up and reactivate and all of that, how hard was that initial lift to start building this practice?
That's an interesting question, because with hindsight, I can look back and say, yes, all of the things for growth were there, and we just had to try to transition in and then just follow the process. But at the time, there was a lot of things we were unsure of, because it was an older practice, an older doctor. A lot of the reports and things like that were wrong, so it was hard to get a good feel for, to get real definitive, like, this is how many new patients
Data.
a month. Yeah, and like, is the patient base really coming in? They were using paper charts. They had, Dentrix, but they're using paper charts. So Dentrix was just for like putting people on the schedule. So there was a lot of things that we were nervous about. Obviously, with hindsight now, yeah, there's definitely a new patient growth there. Scaling that up was just basically adding the hygiene days, closing the back door, making sure you're not losing patients, keeping the reactivation going, and then you just grow with that. So all that worked really, really well. Obviously now it looks great. we were very nervous about some of those things at the beginning because you don't know what you
You
don't
don't
know.
know.
And
Yeah.
that's where SP helps a lot, especially in that first year, because they have their system of, hey, look at these things, measure these things, follow the process, and that helps grow the patient base. So yeah, it was
Well,
all there. It was hard to feel as confident as we do now at that time.
right. Well, once you've built that engine and you're like, okay, I see it. I see the data. You didn't have good data. You had paper charts and like
Yeah.
they were throwing people on the schedule just to use it as like a Calendly, more or less. One question I also had was, did both of you come into this expecting to be here full time or part time each, or did one of you get a job somewhere else in the
Yeah.
meantime while the practice scaled up?
So another good question where and I'll always remember this because when we bought the practice, I told my wife Whitney, I was like, look, you need to be ready to like go work for Heartland any day. Like if we're not making ends meet, like just we'll go work for corporate and just put food up, which in hindsight was a crazy way to think, and everybody thinks that's insane. But I was nervous about that, to be completely honest. But our goal was to transition in together, grow it together. A lot of those early days for Whitney, to be completely honest, wasn't just really being a dentist some days because, like everybody talks about, that transition, the staff turnover, you're making changes, it's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of times that she was just like working front desk and answering phones because we had to. So now it's at a point where she and myself and the associate, we are all just fully being dentists. But our goal is to get to where we're going to be both full time, and then we just had our second child 5 months ago, so we were planning on that. So it was like, okay, once we get it going, Whitney scales back, have some kids, bring in an associate. That was our plan, if you will.
Okay, so you had the long term vision. You also had the emergency plan, and some people are like, "Oh no, you got to burn the bridges. Like, don't think about the contingency plans." But I honestly think that like you need to be prepared to provide for your family whatever it takes. And if both of you are income producers, your dual income family, um, like that is a really nice backup to have. Anytime you're doing a startup, anytime you're doing an acquisition, if you've got a spouse with another income, that is a safety net. And so the ability to flip that switch allows you to jump in with the eventual goal. So you didn't have to pull the emergency brake, but it
Yeah,
was
no,
there.
it was on the table, but
Yep.
it never got to that. No, so, but
Yeah.
that was a concern. Looking back, it shouldn't have been, but it was at the time.
So you start working with a coach from shared practices. Do you remember
Yeah.
any other major challenges like where crap hit the fan in that first year? Team members leaving, or anything like that, or just financial challenges, early struggles in practice ownership.
Yeah, so the finances never became a challenge. The challenge for me personally was never owned a practice. So you step into this ownership role and you go into a practice like our situation where the practice is older, they're doing paper charge. The coding, we're significantly undercoding. We're not collecting up front. A lot of the processes that really should be there and some of the systems that really should be there, none of that's in place. And you hear it all the time. Everyone's in the podcast saying, "Oh, you got everything comes down to systems," and it's true. But when you jump into that the first time, in my head, I was like, "Yeah, we need good systems. We need good systems." But then you get into it and you start working, and you're like, "Okay, we have no systems. Which ones do we start with? How do you build it from the ground up? And how do you do all that with the team that just transitioned to you, the patient base that just transitioned to you? No one trusts you." So yeah, you have staff turnover. We still have some of the original team members. We had some great people that we started with. That was really, really great. But yeah, the staff turnover when we would try to implement some stuff and it just wasn't going well. We had some of that. The collecting up front, patients just love when you change that. So that was a lot of, we got some pushback there for the first few months. A lot of the just billing was really incorrect in a lot of ways as far as insurance stuff. Either their codes were being taken incorrectly, or treatment plans were put in incorrectly. The way that they were doing it then was the doctor would write on a sheet of paper what they did. That sheet of paper would go to the front. The front would then pick the codes that they thought were correct, and then that would be the claim. And then when that came back, if bill or no bill, they would, bill the patient. A lot of inconsistencies. So had to just kind of scrap the whole thing, clean it up, teach everybody what codes were, teach everybody what codes we take for what procedures. Um, Claim submission, had to just really clean that up from the ground up. EOB posting, had to really just, again, build that up from the ground up. The treatment plans, those take a long time to really teach the team, because if you say, hey, we want to collect up front, you've got to teach your whole team how to put in the right codes, organize those codes, present those codes, and give the patient the right estimate with their insurance. So now you're verifying insurance, which is a whole other system. So
Right.
just a lot. There was just a ton. I mean, I could talk forever about all the things that we did that first year, but you just kind of start, you pick and choose where to start, and you work on that. You try and get that particular system to where it's working fairly well, and you go to the next one, and you go to the next one. And that was our approach.
Well, and honestly, that's often what people have to do. Occasionally you acquire a practice that like actually has systems, and then you're making the decision, do we tweak this? Like, this is working well enough. Is it worth it to overhaul this for a marginal improvement versus this thing over here that is actually burning down,
Yeah.
or doesn't have a system, or really is not working? Sounds like you came in and there was not even a lot just there. I mean, you talked about not having good data, and now I can see why. It's like, how could you know with paper charts and codes just kind of being picked willy-nilly, the record keeping, all of that? You don't even know what you're working with when you walk into a practice like that. And that's where having a coach who can tell you, this is what we're going to build first, this is the most essential thing, while we have the flywheel of the new patients. We've closed the back door, we're marketing, we're growing our hygiene base. You fortunately have time. If you've got 4 hygienists worth of patients coming through, or more, and all this, and you don't have these systems, everything falls off. The wheels fall off the car, and you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So this is the phase that you were in. Like, I'm kind of glad that you had time between when you took over and when you were at a full 2-doctor capacity.
I think some of the things you touched on there is more insight to our particular situation, our particular practice. We saw a ton of potential because everything was so broken. Financially, that can be great, and you can get in at a good price because things are, everything's broken, like you said. But that's the tough part. Is sure, your entry point is lower, but you got to build all that from the ground up. Whereas you buy a more established practice that has more of these things in place, you may be paying more up front, but you're transitioning to something that's already got a lot of systems in place. But
it's like buying a fixer-upper on the real estate front. It's like you bought a house where you're like, we're going to live in this house while we tear down the walls and redo the kitchen and redo the bathrooms, and we still have to live here while we're doing it, is essentially, but you know that you got it for a deal, and on the back end it's going to be worth way more, which I've never even conceptualized it like that until you said that just now.
But we had some great stuff. I mean, we had turnover, but there's some people that are still with us that we had from that day one that's just, that part is maybe called luck. I don't know. But some of those people just really hunkered down. They bought in, they believed. They let us make the changes. It was not easy for them. I'll always look back to those early days, and I just commend all of those people, because I try to put myself in their shoes of this, this other guy coming in with his wife, and
changing everything.
And one thing I'll always look back on that they always make fun of me for is when we, and I asked Pete to not tell me to say this. This was the other, I won't say who it is, but the other consultant, and they said, hey, make 0 changes. And so I came to the team and I was like, look, we're gonna come in and we're gonna make 0 changes. And then I came in and I realized, and I was like, I gotta change everything.
Yeah.
But they stuck through it, and let us make those changes, and it wasn't easy on anyone. But it's I think resulted in something that we're all very proud of, and we have an office that we're really, really it's just like an honor to be a part of this practice for us. So.
That's really cool. Well, and I appreciate that you put yourself in their shoes. I think a lot of doctors maybe don't have the patience or the perspective to like sit in that team member's frame of mind. And that's also when you kind of ignore what is the experience of this for them? And then you change and then you change it again and you like are all over the place. There is a real burnout and fatigue of changing and changing and changing. So it's like you need to have that sympathy and that patience. You have to be firm. You have to know exactly what you're changing and why it's worth it, and it's worth the follow up and it's worth the auditing to get that in place. And so, you've been able to have empathy, which I think goes a long way. Like there's the dictatorial, like, hey, this is the change we're making, and if you don't like it, get out of Dodge. Like, you can leave. So when you have that empathy, I think there is a sense from the team of like, okay, at least he understands, she understands that, what this requires. Um, Within that first year, do you remember the kind of growth that you had? You said it was slightly under 1 million of initial collections. Do you remember what you guys did in your first 12 months?
I think that first year we did just over 2. Yeah, yeah. Which I know it sounds like amazing, right? And again, we're very proud of that, and we're proud of what we accomplished. And that's why I laugh, because again, I told my wife, I was like, "Hey, like, you need to be ready to go work somewhere else and just pay the bills."
Right.
But it's just because you don't know what you don't know, and we were unsure of a lot of things, but everything that we've done and everything that SP's coached us on and that we've implemented has worked well, and we have a great team, and that's translated to a lot of growth. So
a lot of growth. Well, and I laugh so hard because, we've had other listeners. It's hard as a listener who's a practice owner who's not had that kind of growth to be like, shared practices always talking about these double their practice in their first year. But you're in a situation where you bought that solo prime to grow. You don't have to go rural to be successful. You can be successful in a major metro. You can be successful in all sorts of areas.
Sure.
But when you are rural and you've got the space and you've got the demand and you've got the patient numbers and you've got coaching and you know where you're going to go, you can accelerate. You can get there faster, and then have options. Okay, so tell us about years 2.5. Where has the growth continued to go, and at what point did you bring on a third doctor?
So let me just see if I can get you the correct
Let's hear
number.
it. Let's hear the numbers.
I mean, we're just over 3 for 2023. We were just over 3. So we've grown a little bit each year. With 9
Grown
ops.
a little bit each year. So humble, so modest.
It's not, there's a lot of things and there's a lot of people that make that happen. So
absolutely,
I don't
want to poo-poo that. And I asked permission before the
Sure.
call if we could talk about numbers. And it's a team lift, and you're serving more patients. You are creating value for your community, for your family, for your team. There are things you can do as an office that you can't do when you're not as successful, and there's security in them knowing that, hey, we've got a good job that's not going anywhere because our doctors are doing well, and we care about this. We care about the mission, knowing that not everyone is as fortunate, and not just saying it's good luck. I'm saying you've got a good set of circumstances that you really capitalized on, which is awesome.
Yeah, and we're very proud of it. And I think it's not your reaction. It's more, I'm not sitting here to just brag about numbers or anything like that. It's
right.
We've had success. We've done well, but we've done well because I kind of have a great group of people around me. My wife is wonderful. She helps a lot. We have a great associate right now. All those pieces make it happen. And also being rural helps a lot. There's everybody knows that too. So, and then SP coaching. So it's not me, and I'm not talking about to brag. I'm just, I guess, sharing it. So hopefully help a listener or help show what's possible, and hopefully encourage someone to make a decision or make the leap to, hey, ownership is still a great thing. It's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say the last 2.5 years have been easy, but you can do well.
That's awesome. Well, so tell us about, as we wrap up this conversation, tell us about what are your current challenges? What are the things you're excited about? I know that you said that you just built out a 9th operatory. You've moved all the computers in the doctor's offices upstairs.
Yeah.
What are the challenges and opportunities in front of you now?
So our biggest challenge, and we knew this was going to be a challenge, or we were hoping it would be a challenge when we bought this space, is we don't own this space. It's again, a downside of rural is we're in a very old building. We have 9 chairs. Our equipment is old, and we are capped on space. Can't get any bigger in the space, no matter how hard I want to. So we're building a new space. So we bought the land. That's our next big goal, our next big transition. But that's our big challenge. Is okay. We've grown in this space. We've filled out this space. If we want to continue to grow and continue to build our team, we can't do it in this space. So that's a whole world that I'm in right now of, meeting with architects and going over design plans and trying to get equipment and piecing all that together and then, building it. So that's what we're working on right now. So that's just like a business challenge, personal team challenge. A big part, and you touched on this earlier, a big part of growth is you're pushing people and you're making changes. You also risk burnout. You push people too hard and you make too many changes, people just get tired. So finding that balance where I'm getting the most out of myself and out of my team and we're continuing to grow in the right way, but not pushing it so hard where it's just burning everybody up, is a personal challenge for me that I'm learning how to balance. I have a great lead assistant, a great office manager that give me great feedback on a personal level. It's another thing about ownership. If you don't want personal feedback, it's probably not the world for you. I mean, I think
it all bleeds together. Your health, your mental stress, your marriage, all of these. I mean, especially in your case, your marriage, but they all come into play in how you show up at work. And if you're burnt out and dying on the inside, and ownership making more money hasn't solved any of your problems, all of a sudden, like, you start to implode and it affects everything. It affects the practice. It affects your team. Yeah. That's, a side note. That's why I started. I've got a little side group that helps father dentists, cope with all that stuff. So I totally get it. And the burnout is real.
It is. And it's not even just me personally. If your team burns up, I mean,
yep,
you got to keep a pulse on all of it. And it's a challenge, and I don't have the recipe for how to do that perfectly. I guess for me, I go upstairs into this attic and I just hide myself in this dungeon up here and just sit in peace. But no, that's something that as a team we're working on, that I'm working on is hey, how do we continue to push ourselves but not burn ourselves out to the point of just now we hate our lives.
Crash and burn. Yeah. Well, so that's super exciting that you're doing a ground up. You said ground up build?
Yeah, ground up. I said if you're rural, again, we are rural. There's we try to find a building that we could transition into. It's just I couldn't find anything. So it probably financially is going to be a bigger burden to build from the ground up, but that's what we have to do, and
the reality.
So
well, and the nice part is when you've got a practice that large and you've got continued demand and you've got 2.5 years of scaling and knowing that, like, actually we can continue to grow, it becomes worth it. And it is a big cost and it is a big investment. You're like, you paid X amount for the practice already and you've had that loan, and a ground up, adds a year to what can already be a 12 to 18 month experience. So my assumption is that you guys are going to be bursting at the seams for a long period of time right now.
Yes.
And then finally you'll get your space, and then you'll fill it up way faster than you ever thought you would. So,
hopefully. But our Caitlin, our coach currently, she points that out every time I have a phone call. It kills me. She's like, hey, in 12 months, you're going to have a real problem with capacity. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
How many ops are you going to?
Well, it'll be plumbed for 16. I don't know if I can outfit 16 at the beginning, but
yeah,
I'm going to try. So,
I love it. That's the biggest multiple of 4 I've heard yet, from a listener or a client of ours who is like taking to heart, 4 per doctor. So you could have 4 full-time doctors side by side. Your wife and you could be any combination of part-time and then 3 other doctors, on top of that. That is a healthy practice. That is pretty amazing. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for what's possible. I'm excited for the direction you're going. Please, continue to keep a pulse on yourself and the team and the spouse and the kids and all of the things with the burnout. But that's now the challenge, is this angst of getting into a new space while managing a practice that's bursting at the seams.
Yeah. So it's like you said, it's a balance. It's we're doing our best. I think we're doing a pretty good job. Will we fill out 16 ops? Time will tell, but we're going to build for that and just see where it takes us.
You will. You won't regret it, and that's super exciting. It's going to give you all sorts of options. So, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for trusting our coaches the last 2.5 years and where they've gotten you, sharing your story, and it just goes to show that it's like, okay, these are the possibilities, and if you buy the right practice, you've got the runway in front of you. You've got the coaching. A lot is possible, and you can do a lot of good through that practice. So, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Richard. But yeah, we love you guys. So wouldn't be here without SB. So we thank you guys for everything you've done the last couple of years, and wouldn't be here without you. So.
Awesome. No, that's great to hear. Well, if anyone's interested, come to our courses. Come learn how to do this. Come learn how to buy the right practice. If you haven't bought yet, work with us on the due diligence. There's other people that do it, but and then we'd be happy to grow that practice with you. So, thanks once again, and we'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.